This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy. We go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
Welcome to this deep dive. We're jumping right into something really quite remarkable today. A look at unexpected intelligence,
Yeah.
and surprising adaptations in urban wildlife.
Yeah, specifically a bird of prey. Our source is this fascinating new research paper. It captures something, well, pretty jaw-dropping.
It really is. So our mission today is to unpack the insights from this study, focusing on the, let's call it street smarts this one bird showed.
And what that tells us, or maybe forces us to reconsider about animal cognition, especially in these really complex city environments.
Right? And the hook, the thing that makes this paper just so compelling is how it describes a hawk using human traffic signal.
And traffic patterns.
In a way that's just, well, it's never been documented before for hunting. So, okay, let's get into this surprising discovery.
Okay, so first off, cities are tough places for wildlife. That's kind of the baseline.
Definitely. All the human activity, the buildings, and especially cars, vehicle traffic, it's a challenging landscape.
A really difficult landscape for survival. And yet
they adapt. Birds often show this incredible flexibility, these behavioral shifts to, make city living work.
precisely, they figure it out. The paper mentions some classic examples, things we might have heard of.
Like crows dropping hard-shelled nuts or something onto roads.
Exactly, for cars to crack open for them, or, carrion birds, scavengers, taking advantage of roadkill.
The simple opportunism, yeah. And you even hear about smaller birds interacting with cars too, right?
Gleaning insects off grills or radiators, sometimes even nesting inside vehicles or trains.
Wow, nesting in trains.
Yeah, adapting to the structures and the movement we introduce. The source even notes small birds using moving cars deliberately
Wow.
as cover to hide from predators, so they're interacting with our systems in these, well, surprising ways.
Okay, so that brings us to the star of today's story. Accipiter hawks.
That's the group, yeah.
Yeah.
Birds like Cooper's hawks, goshawks, sparrowhawks, they're naturally stealthy hunters.
Born ambush predators, aren't they?
Absolutely. Their whole style is built around using cover, waiting patiently, sometimes for long periods.
And
Then these incredibly fast, agile chases. Pure pursuit power.
which, even out in the wild, that takes serious cognitive skill, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. You're talking planning, predicting where the prey will go, being super observant.
It points to, like, a high baseline level of intelligence already.
It really does. And it seems those inherent abilities serve them pretty well in cities. The study mentions that moding into urban areas can actually boost hunting success for some accipiters.
That's counterintuitive. You'd think it'd be harder.
Right. But it seems not always, and that's why we're seeing more of them wintering or even nesting right in urban zones.
There's spotting opportunities we might just walk right past. Now, the paper lists some other clever urban hunting tricks seen in accipiters. These were known before this big discovery, correct?
Correct. Things like goshawks using high vantage points, like rooftops, for hunting perches.
Makes sense.
Or this technique called backyard jumping, using houses, sheds, fences, whatever's there for cover in residential areas during an attack.
Sneaky.
Very. And foraging under streetlights or other artificial lights, that's been seen in goshawks and actually noted in Cooper's hawks before, too.
Okay, that's some more maybe dramatic methods.
Yeah, like chasing prey into, say, narrow alleyways or even large glass windows. That's been observed in Eurasian sparrowhawks and sharp-shinned hawks,
Yeah.
trapping them.
Using the urban structure itself as a weapon, almost.
In a way, yes. And there were also these interesting observations from Ukraine. Sparrowhawks and goshawks using moving vehicles like cars and streetcars as mobile cover, sort of like a moving blind to sneak up on prey.
Okay, but that's still different from what this new paper is talking about, right?
Very different, because the study focuses specifically on the Cooper's hawk.
And they've become pretty successful city dwellers since around the 70s.
Yeah, which is interesting in itself. They're not tiny, adaptable generalists. They're medium-sized raptors. You wouldn't necessarily peg them as prime candidates for urban success.
And you mentioned before this study, the only really novel urban hunting technique linked specifically to them was
Hunting around artificial lights, that was pretty much it. So this new observation, it really stands out. It was genuinely groundbreaking.
Okay, let's paint the picture. Where did this observation happen? Set the scene for us.
Right. This took place in West Orange, New Jersey, at a particular street intersection, which the paper just calls Main Street and Side Street to keep it general.
Got it. Main Street's the busy one, I assume.
That's right, busier thoroughfare.
Sure.
Side Street is usually quieter, except during the morning rush hour.
Oh, okay.
Then cars start queuing up at the red light, waiting to turn onto Main Street.
Standard stuff. But there's a twist with the light, isn't there?
Exactly. Here's the critical detail. Normally, the red light for side street traffic is about, say, 30 seconds long.
Which means maybe 3 or 4 cars stack up.
Yeah, a short queue, maybe up to house number 4 on Side Street. But, and this is key, if a pedestrian pushes the crosswalk button over on Main Street,
Then what?
then the red light for Side Street gets much longer, like 90 seconds long, 3 times as long.
Okay, huge difference.
Yeah,
And that means the queue of cars.
stretches way further back down Side Street. Instead of stopping near house #4, it might reach all the way back to house #10, a significantly longer line of stopped cars.
And there's another piece to this puzzle. Something about a sound.
Crucial piece. The paper highlights that when that pedestrian button is pushed, it doesn't just change the light timing, it also activates these audible signals at the streetlight.
For visually impaired pedestrians.
Exactly. And those signals run for about 45 seconds during that extended red light phase. And importantly, this doesn't happen often.
How rare.
The sound signal only activated during roughly 3.75% of the red light cycles they observed, so relatively infrequent.
Okay, so a rare signal predicts a much longer line of cars. And what was the hawk hunting there? What was the attraction?
A consistent food source. There was this small flock, mainly house sparrows, some mourning doves, European starlings hanging around house number 2 on Side Street.
Why there?
Seems the residents were putting out leftovers regularly, so predictable prey location each morning.
Okay, so you've got predictable prey and this complex but predictably variable traffic pattern with very specific cues, the sound signal. Now tell us about the hawk's strategy.
Well, the observer started noticing this immature Cooper's hawk making hunting attempts that seemed tied to the traffic somehow. They documented this very precise sequence of events.
What happened?
First, the hawk would show up perched in a tree way back near house number 11, quite a distance from the prey flock at house #2.
Okay, quite far back. And the crucial part was when it appeared there.
Exactly. It wasn't just randomly perching there. It showed up specifically when those audible pedestrian signals were active.
Whoa, so it was waiting for that sound.
It appeared to be. Yes, it would perch there when the sound was on, and then it would just...
Wait for what?
For the queue of cars on Side Street to grow longer, using that growing line of vehicles as cover.
And did it have a specific trigger point to actually launch the attack?
It did. The paper is very clear. The hawk only took off after the queue of cars reached back to about house number 8.
Okay, needs that specific length of cover. Then what?
Then it flies. Incredibly low, the description says less than a meter off the ground. Zooms along the sidewalk for about 65 meters. Makes a sharp 90-degree turn right at a tree near house number 1, and then, this is the amazing part, crosses Side Street between the stopped cars.
Between the cars?
Right between them, using them as the final screen to burst out and attack the prey flock at house number 2.
That is incredibly precise. A multi-stage ambush using the traffic itself. And the observer connected the hawk's arrival directly to that sound signal.
Yes, that seems to have been the real aha moment. Realizing the hawk wasn't just showing up randomly, it was timing its appearance with that specific pedestrian signal.
Understanding that the sound meant a longer wait.
And therefore, a longer queue of cars.
Which provided the exact cover it needed for that whole elaborate approach path.
Exactly. From the start at house 11, all the way down the sidewalk and across the street, it needed the long queue for the whole thing to work.
And they made sure this wasn't just coincidence, like statistically.
They did. They crunched the numbers. The probability of the hawk just happening to show up at its perch only when that infrequent sound signal was on, purely by random chance. It was minuscule.
Hello.
The p-value was approximately 0.000053, extremely low.
So incredibly unlikely to be random.
Which strongly suggests the hawk wasn't just getting lucky. It somehow knew that sound predicted the specific conditions the long car queue needed for its strategy to succeed.
Okay, so this blows simple Pavlovian conditioning out of the water, doesn't it? This isn't just, hear a bell, get food.
Not even close. That's why it's so remarkable. The cognitive leap required here is pretty significant.
What kind of thinking does this imply? What does the hawk need to be able to do?
Well, several complex things are likely involved. First, you need a precise mental map of the whole area.
Right, because you said the prey wasn't even visible from where it started.
Exactly. Starts at house 11, preys at house 2, totally out of sight initially. It had to know the layout, the path, the target location without seeing it until the very final moments of the attack.
Okay, spatial awareness, a mental map. What else?
It had to notice and then understand a completely novel human-created cause and effect link.
The link between the sound and the cars.
Yes, a specific auditory cue, that pedestrian signal sound predicting a specific visual environmental change, the much longer cue of cars. That's abstract.
And not just understand the link, but figure out how to exploit it.
Precisely. It deduced that only the longer cue, the one reliably predicted by that sound, provided enough continuous cover for its entire, quite complex approach route.
That sequence.
Yeah.
Start far back, fly low along the side, turn sharply, cross between cars. It needed cover for all of that.
It did, and only the long cue provided it.
Now, the paper mentions that planning complex routes, detours around obstacles, that's something we associate more with, say, corvids, crows, ravens.
Yes. Them and some mammals are known for that kind of spatial problem solving. It hasn't really been documented clearly in birds of prey before this.
Although tests suggest raptors are capable learners.
Oh, yes. Lab studies do suggest their learning abilities are potentially on par with parrots and corvids, who are considered avian Einsteins, basically.
So this observation provides a stunning real-world example of that potential cognitive power in action.
A really concrete example. And this level of, behavioral sophistication, this ability to grasp and leverage totally new human environmental factors like traffic signals. It gives us a big clue as to why Cooper's hawks have managed to colonize cities so successfully.
Right. Does the study suggest they, evolved this intelligence because they moved into cities?
Not necessarily, no. The thinking leans more towards this being a demonstration of intelligence that the species already possessed.
Pre-existing smarts, basically.
Yeah. The paper brings up other examples to support this idea, like studies showing urban foxes are maybe bolder, but not fundamentally more intelligent than their rural cousins. Or that urban caracaras, another clever bird, might learn faster in some contexts, but the underlying learning process seems the same as non-urban ones.
And you mentioned earlier, many Cooper's hawks found in cities, especially young ones, like this one probably was initially.
They often come from outside the city. They disperse from non-urban breeding areas.
So they're bringing their innate abilities to the city, not developing them there from scratch.
That seems the more likely explanation based on current evidence, which, as the source points out, raises this really fascinating question. If these hawks, potentially newcomers to the urban scene, can so quickly figure out and exploit the rules of a complex artificial human system like traffic patterns, then what level of understanding, what intricate knowledge might they possess about their natural environments, the complex dynamic landscapes they evolved in?
Wow. What are they figuring out in the woods or fields that we just have no idea about?
Exactly. Things we probably haven't even conceived of looking for.
So, for you listening, this whole story is just a perfect illustration, isn't it? How wildlife is showing incredible adaptability, incredible intelligence, often right under our noses.
In places we might think are mundane or just, background noise, like a suburban street corner during rush hour.
It really highlights how much we can learn if we just pay attention to the small details.
Yeah. That hawk waiting for the crosswalk signal wasn't just some random event. It was like a little window opening up into an animal mind, actively making sense of and using our world, our complex systems.
You really have to stop and think about the mental processing involved. To link an abstract sound cue to a future event, more cars lining up, and then plot a very precise physical strategy based entirely on that prediction.
It's genuinely impressive cognitive work.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the main takeaway from this deep dive is pretty clear. We've got this compelling evidence focused on one specific Cooper's hawk, showing just an unprecedented level of understanding and strategic use of human traffic patterns.
Absolutely. It connected a specific sound signal to a change in a traffic light sequence, and then used the predictable result, that long queue of cars, as calculated dynamic cover for its hunt.
And the study makes a very strong case. This wasn't just luck or simple association.
No, it points to an intelligent predictive strategy built on observation, understanding cause and effect in a novel environment, and then precise execution based on that understanding.
Which leaves us with a final thought, something for you to maybe mull over. Consider all the other ways animals might be watching us, learning about our world, understanding the complexities we create. maybe even leveraging our systems, our structures, our routines in ways we haven't even begun to imagine.
What else is happening out there right under our noses that shows this kind of intelligence? What else are we missing?
Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.